Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sachs, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sachs.
Well, hello again, and welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. Glad to have you with us. I say it every week, but I mean it every week. I really appreciate the fact that you follow the show, you comment on the show, you let us know. A big shout out to Mark Warner, owner of KVGI Media and the producer of the show. And also big shout out to Christine Dean, who is the DFW networking diva. She's a very, very good friend. And right now, as you head toward the holidays, might be a good time to check your website, your marketing plan, and see if it may need to be tweaked just a little bit. Give Christine a call. Check out whether you can get a free consultation. Also, as we head towards the winter season, you may want to check out your AC and heating air, system. Call No Sweat Experts. They can help you. They have a terrific maintenance plan of visiting you 4 times a year, not the traditional twice a year and all. But now is the time to get prepared for the winter season, and also call No Sweat Experts. Well, we're going to talk about a sensitive issue today. And, when you want to talk about sensitive issues, sometimes it's hard to get someone to share the conversation with you. Today is not one of those days, because a very, very dear friend, Terri Martinez, is with me this morning to discuss the very serious topic of domestic violence. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it's important that you know what it is. Everybody's heard about domestic violence, but we don't necessarily know enough about it. We don't do enough about it. Terri is proactive about it, and it's for a very, very important personal reason, and that is because she was there. So, Terri, thank you very, very much for being with me this morning.
Well, thanks for having me, Stuart.
Well, we have talked about lots of other things in the past. We met through a networking group, the Alan McKinney Netweavers. We became friends, and as we talked and we met at veterans groups, I started learning more about you, and you started opening up a little more to me. And I never, ever, by just looking at you and talking to you, would ever have thought that you were ever a victim of domestic violence. So I'm going to just start throwing it right out there on the table. I want you to tell people what they need to know about domestic violence, what the signs are, and what your personal story was.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the personal story because that's probably the best way to start. I did not grow up in any kind of domestic violence situation. Did not have family that was abusive. My dad was a great guy, still is a great guy. My parents, for the most part, got along like most parents. They had a little argument here and there, or whatever, but nothing crazy. Never any abuse ever. And so that's number one. You don't always come from it,
Right.
But one of the things I think that probably might have helped is that I didn't know anything about it. We had a pretty good upbringing. It wasn't talked about. We lived in the country. We had good, nobody had those problems or that we knew of. Of course, back then, nobody talked about them much. But anyway, so I moved on. I had a relationship in college, ended up marrying him. We were together for a long time. Then we broke up. We were just young and stupid. He was a great guy, but probably still is. And I rebounded hard from that. And that's what led me to the abusive husband. In about 1992, I believe it was, we met, we started dated for almost a year, got married, got pregnant very quickly, had not planned that, just kind of happened. And had a little girl in 93, October of 93. She just turned 28. I cannot even believe that. But it was shortly after, we're literally within a week of getting married that it started. And so that's kind of one of the things that I always bring up is, first of all, getting educated. I always say it just came out of nowhere. But when I went back and I started getting more involved, a lot of people know I'm a Mary Kay consultant, and I'm also an ambassador for the Mary Kay Charitable Foundation. And the foundation provides funds to two different organizations. They have two tiers. The first one being cancer that affect women, and the second being domestic violence. And everybody knows this month is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we do not make light of that. We have a lot of that in our family as well.
Right.
But a lot of people kind of forget that it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month, or maybe they don't know. I really appreciate you bringing me on to kind of chat about this. But, one of the first things I always tell people is, I was like this before that relationship. And at the end of that relationship, it was like a totally different person. You would not have believed who I was. I don't believe who I was, because it was just the way that the abuser works. And so I think the first thing I always want people to know, young women especially who are starting that dating life, is get educated, know the signs. I didn't know what to look for. So the quick marriage, and I say quick because it was like we were just dating and then all of a sudden, oh, let's get married next month. But what? Wait, what? It was that quick. Let's do it. Let's get it going. I want you to stay here. I want you to do this. It was that control and that power. And I didn't see it that way. I was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. We're just moving along, right?
So I a couple questions pop up in my
Sure.
head, and certainly we all know that hindsight is 20/20,
Yes.
and you look back on it, and whenever someone is in this kind of a situation, they look back and they say, "Man, was I stupid that I didn't recognize it?" And you're right. If
Yeah.
you aren't educated on it on the front side, then it's far too easy to blame
Right.
it on that. I just didn't know. In your situation, you said you got married after a nice relationship and all, but
Mhm.
it was young and kind of silly, and you
Mhm.
got divorced. How did you determine, or how in that bounce back time did you realize that you wanted to get in touch with the abusive relationship? I mean, it was a very short period of time, and now you're divorced, and you say, do I want to jump back into a relationship and marriage?
Mhm.
What's your mindset having
Yeah.
come out of a marriage to get involved in a new relationship?
So my first husband and I had been married for a very long, we had been together for a long time, probably about 6 years.
Right.
So when that ended, and then he got married very quickly, and he told me that he was getting remarried, and I thought, oh my gosh, what? It just kind of threw me for a loop. And I really wasn't looking for a relationship. I actually worked with this person that I ended up getting into this relationship with. We were friends, and it was one of those fast and furious romances. Everything just happened very quickly, which is actually one of the one of the big signs. And now I know. But there's this. If I can just throw this out there, there is a program through Mary Kay called Loveisrespect.org, and they came up with these 10 signs to look for in an abusive relationship. And it's a great program, and they handed out these little cards look like this, little that you can keep in your wallet. And they actually had little compacts that we handed out that had it on the inside of the compact. Because the biggest problem in getting help a lot of times is being able to get help without somebody knowing or seeing. But anyway, so these signs, I went through them, checking your cell phone or email. We didn't have cell phones back then, but
Right.
phone all the time, constantly putting you down, big time, extreme jealousy or insecurity, explosive temper, isolating you, making false accusations, mood swings, physically hurting you, of course, possessiveness, telling you what to do. All of those things, I look back and I go, holy moly, check, 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 check. And how did I, this strong, fierce, independent young woman, get into that? And I woke up one day and I went, who am I? How did this happen? And I think it happens more often than people realize.
Well, and that's a something that I think we need to drive home on this program is
Mhm.
for those that are listening and watching, whether we're speaking to you as a potential victim, or as a potential abuser, or it's your son or daughter or niece or nephew or somebody that you know or a neighbor. There are signs, and you have to recognize those signs.
Absolutely.
You in your situation, again, we say to ourselves, duh, why didn't I see
Mhm.
that? You started dating this guy, and there was nothing in the dating part of it that led you to believe that he was a loose cannon.
If I look at this list now, I can give you example after example after example. I was a singer. I still am a singer. And I was good. And I would sing in, the clubs and things like that. Had a little minor recording contract, and went out and did these things. And he was so explosively jealous that places quit calling me to come sing. And that's something I have done since I could talk. It is my passion. It's something I love to do. And I quit doing it.
But it
I
was
quit doing it.
but you didn't recognize the jealousy as
Oh,
a
he's just,
sign that if this relationship goes forward, it's going to be explosive.
no, it wasn't ever against me. It was just, he was jealous,
Yeah.
and, these guys were drunk, and sometimes, I blew it off. I made excuse after excuse after excuse. The isolation when we got married. And that was another thing. We were in Georgia, and he decided to, he was in the Marines. What do they call it when they're only part-time? What am I trying to say?
Reserve.
Reserve, there we go.
Yeah.
And he couldn't go back in full-time in his MOS, so he decided to go switch to the Army, which I was shocked at because he was such a diehard Marine. But anyway, he got moved to Colorado Springs because he had to go through some kind of basic, but
Right.
basically to switch. And so he insisted that I go ahead and finish my master's degree by moving back home to Oklahoma with my folks. So I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Let me do that. But if you think about it, he was really just getting me back with my parents where I couldn't be by myself. He didn't want me in Georgia when he's off somewhere else doing something and he can't keep an eye on me.
Yeah.
And a month later, he says, let's get married. I'm coming. I'm going to have a break. Let's get married on January 1st. I was like, oh, that's kind of quick. And that was my first little, I don't know. And then I thought, whatever. We've been together this long. We're in love. He just wants to get it done. He made a lot of good points. You'll be on my insurance. It'll be, we were getting ready to go into the big Somalian war that was going on at the time. And there were so many things that made sense. And that's what they do is they make sense of it, because they don't want you to figure it out. And, I'm not a stupid person, but we got married, and then immediately moved to Colorado Springs. I had no friends. I had no family. So the isolation began, and it was insane.
And you said that shortly after you got married, the abuse started.
Yes.
Yes. And of course, now you're saying to yourselves, oops, what did I get myself into?
Right. Within weeks, 2 weeks to the day after we got married, I remember jumping in my car, and we're in Colorado and it's January. So there's ice and snow everywhere. And I remember sitting in my car. I couldn't go anywhere because there was snow everywhere. And I thought, what have I done? What have I done? This is crazy, because it had already started with the attacks, and it was crazy.
Okay, but then you get pregnant.
Yeah, I was on birth control, and people have said this before. It's 97% effective. I would not be surprised if he had done things to the pills. I would not be surprised at all. Now that I know what I know, looking back on it. But yeah, no, I had no intention of getting pregnant for years. We had discussed years. And boom, I really thought I had altitude sickness. I remember telling my mom, and she's like, you're either pregnant or you need to go get the doctor and figure out what's going on. And so now I'm pregnant 3 months into the marriage, and I'm already questioning the marriage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And I'm already divorced once. What a
You,
loser,
you're
right?
divorced once. You're now pregnant. Your second husband is abusive to you. You're going through this abuse while you are pregnant.
Mhm. Yep. Oh yeah.
What
Oh
does
yeah.
what does that do to your mental state? What did it do to that? And was there a point where you said, okay, pregnant or not pregnant, whatever, I got to get out of here and I'll go back to my parents in Oklahoma?
You know, I didn't. There were many moments of depression. There were many moments of what have I done? But then it became, and he had a lot to do with this thought process because it was constant. It was a lot of mental and emotional abuse, a lot. Some physical, but a lot of mental. You know, I can't believe you've let yourself go this way. When I
Yeah.
started getting bigger because I was pregnant. I was 127 pounds when I got pregnant. I would kill to let myself go that way right now. It was, you know, you'll never leave me because you've already been divorced once. What are your parents going to say? And even though I knew in my heart that wasn't true, um, you know, you can't leave me now because we have a kid coming. We have a baby on the way, you know. And he kind of calmed down with some of the violence toward me. Unfortunately, it went to my dog. I had a dog that he abused somewhat, and you know, that's another sign. That's another sign.
Well, that is one of the most critical parts of this whole discussion in my mind, and that is the question is raised: why do victims stay?
Yes. That is the best question ever. And thank you for not asking the question that I have probably been asked a million times. And this is one thing that I will make before I answer your question. When you speak up, when you ask a person who's been through this a question like, why did you stay? Be prepared for the answer because it's not always pleasant. But also don't ever ask something like I've been asked a million times, which is, didn't you see those signs ahead of time? I want to go, oh yeah, I saw them. I just decided to go ahead and marry him anyway. Because some people do. Some people think they can change them.
Well, you're absolutely right. The statistics show that sometimes you're in an abusive relationship and you realize that outside the abusive relationship is going to be a tough road
Right.
ahead. So
Right.
maybe I should just stay here. I got a roof over my head, got a nice place, and all. Maybe he's making a good living and all, and so I can deal with a little bit of abuse in order to take care of the children.
And nine
Whatever.
times out of 10, yeah, what happens is they don't even think about it in quite that process. It's more the abuser making sure you understand you won't make it out there. You need me. You
Right.
can't handle this. And that's
Right.
that. And they don't say it in that much of a succession. It's a process over time of whittling away your self-defense, your self-esteem. I mean, it's something you can't even imagine. But in answer to your question about why they stay, sometimes they don't have anywhere to go. If you look at Collin County right now or Allen, Texas, which is where I am, there is no domestic violence shelter in Allen, Texas. So let's say I'm in an abusive relationship right now. Here's how mine went. We didn't have cell phones back then, but we had phones. He would pick up the phone every day and hit read out to see if I called anybody. I had a car, but he would check the mileage before he left for the day, and he would check it when he got home to see if I went anywhere. And this is after I had my baby. So when I was pregnant, I was working, and he started the process. You know, you really don't need to work. You don't need to have a job. And it was like my only out. I mean, that was the only time I went anywhere. And then after I had her, my job decided that they did not need me to come back. So it kind of worked in his favor. So he decided that I was the only person that could take care of her child. Nobody was allowed to take care of her. Nobody but me or him, which he never did. So I was at home every day, all day long. The house had to be a certain way when he got home. Everything had to be a certain way. So let's go back to why do they stay? Where would I have gone if I were in Allen, Texas? I can't just jump in my car and go, and he would have found me. There's nowhere to stay. I didn't have family. My family was in Oklahoma. I had no one in Colorado, no one. And I had no money. I had no money. He had the bank account. And I didn't have access to it. It was literally him giving me money to go to the grocery store. Here's your money. Go, do what you can with it.
Well,
Um,
and that I think is one of the reasons why victims stay in the relationship. A, they think maybe it will get better, and it rarely does.
I did.
And
I
and
did.
and B, where am I going to go?
Yeah.
Uh, the question comes up, well, why didn't you just reach out to a church or something for shelter or for direction, or get on the phone and call your parents and say, Mom, I'm afraid to say this, and I know I've got this baby now and all, but I made a mistake twice now, and
Mhm.
what should I do?
Oh yeah. And that was the whole thought process is really, I'm going to call my parents a second time loser and a divorce. And they really thought it was too fast anyway, but I didn't listen to them. And now I've got a kid and, I don't want to break up this marriage and have her be from a broken home. And, there's so many things you go through and you think it'll change. He was in the army. He was actually having issues um, outside of our marriage too. He's just a violent person. He was diagnosed many, many, many years later with bipolar. Um, and I used to say it all the time. He didn't drink, he didn't do drugs. It's got to be something chemical that causes these incredible outrages that would happen that I can't even explain to you. It was like, when a cat gets kind of crazy and their eyes turn black, that would happen. And I would know, okay, we need to get out of here.
Well, see, and those were signs that you never knew to look for in the beginning. And also, when young people are going through the dating process, it's all the infatuation and it's the physical connection that you've got, and you never breach a discussion of, is there any mental illness in your family? Do you have any medical issues?
Right.
To know before you go into a relationship, are you bipolar? Or do you have attention deficiency disorder?
Right.
Any of those things that we need to know about each other before we say, I do.
Mhm. Absolutely. You're 100% right. And it's funny that you bring it up about the young people because I always thought that maybe I went through this and got out of it to keep that little baby girl. And she's actually the one who saved me. I tell her that all the time because I looked at her one day and it just snapped. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get her out of this. He never did anything to her, never. But he was violent in a sense that it would just go into a rage and, throwing things and breaking things around her because he just couldn't control himself. So it was never directed at her, but it
And
was.
the jealousy that you recognized earlier during
Mhm.
your dating period,
Yeah.
you kind of thought, well, when we get married, he'll get over that.
I just didn't, yeah, I didn't even connect it as being something like that. I just thought, oh, well, he really cares about me. And, that's something that you have to be careful with because with my daughter, she actually ended up getting into a similar, almost worse situation um, a couple of years ago. And, we left when she was almost 2. And I got her out of it because I thought I cannot have her think this is how a healthy relationship should be. And in answer to
The
my
yelling
question,
and the screaming and the throwing and all that.
no, yeah, I couldn't have her growing up in that. And that's what snapped. And my parents knew nothing. We had been in this marriage for over 2 years. My parents knew nothing. They knew nothing. He actually told me to call them and see if they would talk some sense into me because I had tried to get him to go through counseling on base. I had tried to get him to do things many times, and I had said I was going to leave a couple of times at this point, and he
Well,
didn't do it.
threatening to leave is almost like pouring fuel on a fire.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the single most dangerous time for a person in this situation. And that's what happened with my daughter. She was in a situation, and you look at some of these things, and she even said to me, I knew them. Her situation was a little different. And this is the other way people get in these situations. She's the rescuer. I knew he was like that, but I thought I could change him.
That's an extremely important point, Terry, is
Mhm.
the fact that your daughter was only 2 years old, but even at 2 years old, she had experienced
Mhm.
a violent lifestyle
Yes,
and all.
yes.
So
Well,
later
and
in her life,
he was
later in
in
her,
her life for
yeah.
until she was almost 8.
And so now fast forward when she's in her 20s and she's getting into a relationship, the fact that she came from a situation
Yeah,
like that, she had a little different mindset about, well, I can look past it because I was there.
yep.
And yet she ended up getting into that kind of a situation
Well,
also.
and the good thing with her is it was an early relationship. She had gotten to a point where she recognized, because we had told her her whole life, these are
Right.
the things you look for. Don't get in a relationship like this. And she was kind of in her rebellious, mid-20s kind of thing. And she did. And she knew he was a bad boy and she thought she could change him, thought she could save him. But when she saw that he was going down that path with her verbally, he had never touched her, but it was verbal. And I told her, it's going to get worse. It will always get worse. Not with this guy, because I didn't even know this guy.
Yep.
And she had moved out and was living on her own and had gotten into this relationship. And she finally said, I don't like the way this is going. This looks like it's going in a bad direction. And she broke up with him. And guess what? That's when he attacked her. He almost killed her. He tried to kill her a couple of times. And unfortunately, she had already gotten pregnant by him. And he knew that. And so it was a very bad situation. And fortunately for her, she had somewhere to go. So.
And I want to get into that in a little bit, talking about why things are different today than they were back in the 80s and 90s when you went through this. But when you left this abusive marriage and relationship and all, was there any ongoing contact between your abusive husband and you and your daughter for an extended period of time?
Sadly, yes. We, for 6 more years.
6 years.
6 years. I had to establish residency, first of all, in Oklahoma before I could even file for divorce. I had a child, so there were custody hearings. The judge in that case basically told me I was crazy, that he didn't believe anything I was saying. My ex-husband would constantly call me and talk about killing me. He would talk about killing all of us. He would show up. Now, keep in mind, he's in the Army in Colorado, and I'm now in Oklahoma. And I had gotten a job, and he would just show up in the parking lot of my job. He wouldn't say anything to me, but he would just show up and sit there to let me know that he was there. He would show up at my daughter's daycare. He had found out where she was.
That's part of that bipolar.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In the control. Because we were possessions. We were not just wife and child. So it went on for a very long time. We ended up getting a protective order against him. He tried to kill himself. Or they call it gestures, not attempts, a couple of times. The judge still did not believe me, said that I was, just over exaggerating, like in front of him and a courtroom full of people. The judge is telling me this. And the only reason he granted the protective order was because of the minor child. I really didn't even care at that point. I was just glad it happened. And then it went on. We got divorced. He attempted to kill himself again. So I ended up getting full custody because of some of the things that happened with that. But then for 6 years, it was the mind control. And he worked on her. And that was what was sad, is I had to let him see her. I didn't have a choice. It was legal.
Right. Because that was court ordered.
And so every time she would come, years later, my now husband and I, we called it detox when she would come home, because it was so awful. He would talk so terribly. Oh, mommy's the one who broke this up. She caused all this. She's the reason we're not. It was constant on a little kid, it was just a lot to do with why she ended up in the relationship she had now. So.
Well, and there was kind of a tragic ending to her biological father too.
Yes, he did end up committing suicide when she was 8. He had been diagnosed bipolar, had been given medication for it finally. And because of his ego, I guess is the best way to put it, he felt he didn't need the medication and he went off of it. He had gotten remarried and they were in a very volatile relationship. Both of them were just violent toward each other. And he ended up, it was just a bad deal. He ended up killing himself when she was 8. So we would never, I would, as much as I could not stand the man and didn't want to have to deal with him ever again, I would never wish that on someone, never. And it was a sad end to a struggle that he went through. And, it's unfortunate that he finally got diagnosed and the medication he needed, but then he felt like he could deal with it without that. So it's just a bad deal.
Well, at this point in the show, I want to just reiterate the fact that this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and there is an organization, in fact, a couple of organizations that you should know about. There's the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and you can learn more about them at ncadv.org. I urge you, those that are watching and listening, at least just go to the website and learn a little bit more about that, just so that you've got that in your arsenal in case you or your children, grandchildren are ever confronted in this kind of a situation. And the other one that you had mentioned earlier was Loveisrespect.org, which is part of the Mary Kay organization. It's important that we all know about this because this organization, the National Coalition, was founded just about the time that you graduated from college. And back in the late 80s, that's when the organization was founded, and it's still here today. So, when you're talking about things that are still going on some 40 years, 50 years later, we can't ignore it. We are faced today in a modern times with a lot of single family homes, with also 2-family working situations. Children are left alone. Dad comes home, he's upset. Maybe he stopped at the bar and had a couple of drinks. So the signs of abuse still exist. And the one thing that I think we have learned is that there are a lot, especially if somebody is going through a church wedding, there are a lot more churches and religious organizations that are making young couples go through pre-marriage programs to be educated on what to look for when they go into marriage.
Right.
The love and physical aspect of it, put that on hold a little bit.
Right.
Here's what you need to know before you go into this relationship, before you have children, and all to know. I've been married 47 years. And
that's so awesome. Congratulations.
And I can say this to you and in front of Lauren. Has it always been perfect? No. We've had our fights. I'm the one that has a little bit more of the loose cannon. I have thrown things. I have slammed my hand. My voice, because I've been in broadcasting, I can raise my voice to a level that most people would not like. But I also learned very, very early that you get past that and you say you're sorry and you move forward.
Yes.
That's where some of this, the abuser doesn't want to admit that he's wrong. He's right. She's wrong. And we also should say that this is not just women, that there are men that are abused too.
Right.
I think the statistics show that, one statistic was that on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner.
Yeah. The statistic is 1 in 3 women.
1 in 3 women and 1 in 9 men.
Isn't that crazy? And I will just make one quick point. Abusers will sometimes attempt to make it look like they know they were wrong. It's that honeymoon period. So the massive thing happens, then we get really sweet and sorry, and then we start, working our way around, and then it happens again.
Well, we've seen it in the movies. Oh, please, please, I'll never do that again. I promise.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't we go away for a nice weekend? And we go out for the nice weekend.
Yep.
Boom. Case
It
closed.
doesn't work.
The abuse starts again.
People,
And
and I will not say people can't change. It's very hard for somebody to unlearn that kind of behavior.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean,
you
my
brought
big
up
thing is,
something.
speak up, get
Yeah.
involved, don't, when you were talking about when that organization was founded, here's one thing I will say. People will say, oh yeah, we've made strides, amazing strides. Yes, we have. But let me tell you about a couple of things that happened with my daughter. It was 4 years ago now when this happened. She was so badly attacked that we had to take her to the hospital. We thought her leg was broken. Wow. Oh yeah, it was not good. He was 180 pounds and 6'2", and she weighed 97 pounds and is 5'4" at the time. Just horrible. I can't even begin to tell you the things that happened to her that day. And that's when she said she did not want to see him anymore. Shut the door, and it began. Tried to kill her a couple of times. For whatever reason, stopped. And this is when I always say, there's a reason. You are here for a reason. Your son is here for a reason. You both survived. But we took her to the hospital, or actually we took her to urgent care because we thought maybe her leg was broken. The urgent care told us they could not get involved because we had said it was domestic violence.
That's part of the issue with the police too.
Immediately I was back in 1995.
Yeah.
I was like, what? So we left. We had to go to the emergency room, which they were great. The police detective who interviewed her several days later, after she called and made contact, was horrible. He was a horrible, horrible individual. He blamed her. They came and took crime scene photos because it was that bad. He said he saw her bruises and they weren't that bad. Why did you wait to call? You really just want this guy to go to jail? Is that what it is? Now, this guy, and here's the other part, the guy was he had multiple convictions on him for this kind of thing.
Really?
And so, oh no, he had charge after charge. He had just gotten out of the pen when she met him. And yes, we can all say, oh, well, she knew. Well, that's not okay, because whether she knew or not, that's not an excuse to do things to people. We have got to start, that you hear the victim blaming thing and it kind of gets old, but you know what? It's a real thing. You cannot blame someone for getting beat up. You have to put it where it is supposed to be. He's still not in prison. Nothing happened to him. They actually determined that she was probably the aggressor.
97 pounds.
A 97-pound, 5-foot girl who'd never even had a parking ticket against a man who had years and years and years, multiple protective orders against him for domestic violence and assault. Was not, because he had done it before and he knew what to do. He hit himself in the face with something which caused a big scratch. And so that's
part of the problem too, and it's nothing against our law enforcement.
No, and the police officers that showed up were amazing. So it's not all of them. And I don't even want to give that impression.
Yeah.
This one detective, not so much.
Yeah. Well, the victim will often call the police and say, my husband just hit me.
Yes.
Is he hitting you now? No. Okay. Well, we can't do anything unless what does it take until somebody like your daughter has got a broken leg or is badly beaten and in the hospital before they can step in? Right. I want to do a shout out here because I don't know if you know Sarah Nadal. Sarah Nadal is the founder of Families to Freedom.
Oh, yes.
FamiliesToFreedom.org here in Dallas, and they just expanded to Houston. And what Sarah is an advocate, just like Terri, of domestic abuse. But what Sarah did was set up an organization that will step in and take abused spouses out of the relationship and relocate them to other parts of the country. It's no mystery that sometimes when somebody is abused, they leave and they go to a relative. Well, the abuser knows
Yep.
all of the relatives and
Yep.
knows where to go to apologize, to say, I'll never
Yes.
do it again, and to continue the abusive relationship. And
Mhm.
Sarah has set up Families to Freedom in order to get that person away from family and get
Right.
them into a new lifestyle. Now, let's fast forward for Terri.
Yes.
You left the second relationship. There was a span of time where you said, I ain't going to do this again.
No.
But you did,
I
and
did.
you and your husband Johnny just celebrated your 20th anniversary.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. I did not even think about a single relationship for the rest of my life for 2 years. Was not even looking for one when this one started. We dated for 4 years because I was like, nope, not getting into it. I have to make sure. And bless his heart, he was patient, he was kind, he was everything love is supposed to be.
And he
Um,
was open and honest with you.
Oh,
I
100%, 100%. And he
you,
knew my background. Once we determined that this was going to be a relationship, then I introduced him to my daughter and told him, here's what you're getting into because I felt like I needed to be honest. I mean, my ex
right.
was crazy, and I don't mean that in a light way. I mean, he was in another relationship, but he still could not stand the thought of me being in a relationship, especially with his daughter. So we had to be open and honest about it, and he 100% was supportive. He was exactly what we needed. He was calm, still is. I tell him all the time, he's the calm to my crazy. So, but yeah, he,
Well, and you were older now. You're more mature, and he was willing to listen to your background and willing to say, you know what, I can accept this because what you did was through younger eyes.
mhm.
And as I say, now 20 years later, you have a strong relationship.
Oh, amazing. Yeah,
You, as we said at the start of the show, that an abusive relationship, the hardest thing is to get out of it. But just like you yourself, you are in a better place today. What
100%.
happened to you 20 and 30 years ago will never go away,
Nope.
but you recognize that you wouldn't be the person you are today without that history that you've been able to put on the back burner and get
Right.
past it. And anybody who is in an abusive relationship and all, it's maybe tough today,
Mhm.
but there's always that bright light at the end of the tunnel if
Yes.
you seek the help that is out there.
Yes.
And
Absolutely. Go find it and don't go back. That's my biggest thing. Don't go back. Don't believe them when they say, I'll change, I'll change, I'll change.
right.
Don't take that chance.
And
Take the chance on
study
yourself,
after
not them.
study after study reiterates what you just said,
Yep.
is
It
that
does.
it just doesn't happen that the abuser says, I will change. Because unless they do go through some kind of professional help and they get on the medication and they stay
Right.
on the medication, 90 probably 95% of the time
Right.
they relapse, they go back, and it
Right.
could have a tragic
And it
ending.
usually does. It usually does.
Well,
Absolutely.
again, through Mary Kay, who you are associated with,
Yes.
and I'll loveisrespect.org,
Yes.
and I'll check that out, and also check out ncadv.org, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, because if you're educated at the front end, you can avoid the situation.
Absolutely.
Terri, bless you. You are
Thank you.
such a sweetheart. You are such a good friend,
Thank
and to be able to go in front of an audience like this and talk about it and all, that's the important part, is
you.
the
Yeah.
fact that you can share your story.
It has to be talked about. It's not the dirty little secret it used to be, but it's still an uncomfortable one, and people just don't know what to say. Well, here's what you say. How can I help? How can I help? That's all you got to say. If it's as much as putting a little money toward a foundation or toward, Families to Freedom or Mary Kay's Charitable Foundation, do it. Just do whatever you can. You shop on Amazon, click the little smile.amazon.com and get those donations going to that. I
Right.
mean, It's so little, and every little bit helps.
It's a great idea. Sweetheart, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I love you even more because of who you are, and I'm so grateful that what you've been through is your past.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you're in a beautiful relationship now, and the
Yes.
very, very best going forward to you and Johnny.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Stuart.
And that will do it for another edition of Someone You Should Know. As I always say, be yourself, because everyone else is taken. So go out and be the very best you can be, and be aware, and join me again next week for another edition of Someone You Should Know. Take care.
Bye.